It's the last edition of Business Morning for this week. Welcome and thank you for joining us. I'm Chimeze Obi Iwago. As electricity consumers gear up to pay more for electricity come September 1, the federal government has mapped out strategies towards providing better services for the consumers. The NERC says that the tariff reviews going forward will only follow service-based principles where DISCOs will only be able to review tariff rates for customers when they consult with the customers commit to increasing the number of hours of supply per day and quality of service. And so there wouldn't be any arbitrary tariff increase. In addition, the president has also directed that there should be a nationwide mass metering program in an effort to put a stop to estimated billing for electricity. He also approved a waiver of the import levy on meters so that those that do not have meters can be supplied as early as possible at reasonable costs. Well, joining me now to speak more on this latest development is a special advisor to the president on infrastructure, Ahmad Zakari. Thank you very much, Mr. Zakari, for joining us on the program.
Good morning, Chimezi. How are you?
Very well, thank you. So, what is driving this renewed optimism by the federal government in the power sector? The government now wants to urgently implement the cost-reflective tariff, which has been long clamored for by investors, and also bring in measures supposedly aimed at protecting the vulnerable consumers.
Well, I mean, that's a great question and very timely in terms of what the federal government is trying to do. The NERC, the Nigerian Electricity Regulatory Commission, set out some guidelines and also communicated some conditionalities in terms of what President Muhammadu Buhari had directed the infrastructure on the power sector and the responsible parties to do. When we look at a sector that is so critical to the development of our country, we need to make sure that the structure in which the economics of that sector work, on one hand, allow investors to recover their costs so that they can continue to provide service, but on the other hand, most importantly, that consumers and customers are protected. So the main thrust and the new optimism is because, you know, the EPSRA Act, which is the Electric Power Sector Reform Act, mandated that before any adjustments happen in terms of the commercial relationship between distribution companies and customers, that consultations happen. So the consultations that occurred earlier this year that were monitored by NERC, conducted by the DISCOs with the consumers, really came out with the feedback from Nigerians that they will not pay for darkness, that when services are there, Nigerians will pay. When they're not there, they don't want to pay. And this is why this new move into service-based principles, where the DISCOs have to commit to a level of service that will be monitored before they're able to make adjustments in their commercial relationship with the consumers.
Now, talking about the cost-reflective tariff, there is a belief that this move is as a result of the condition given by the World Bank before Nigeria can have access to the $1.5 billion loan. Is that what it is about?
No, look, I think Nigeria is for Nigerians, and we make our own laws, policies, and decisions. The main thrust of this was we've been reviewing the situation on the electricity market, and you can know that NERC has made certain pronouncements about the desire to move to a more cost-reflective regime. And there were announcements as far back as September, then in January, and then most recently with the deferral of the April 1st tariff, structure that was intended to come out, which was going to be for everyone, regardless of the quality of service that you receive. The president, very concerned about ensuring that Nigerians are treated fairly, began to review and ask questions around, if you're going to ask people to pay, are they getting the service? Number one. Number two, are the poor protected to ensure that the conditions on Lifeline tariff are there? And number three, do they have the right infrastructure for billing and metering? So you saw the capping regulation come out that put a stop to arbitrary estimated billing. And then now you're seeing this move towards estimated to a service-based regime for electricity reviews going forward that is just fair and equitable for all Nigerians. We don't take instruction from any foreign power. We're a sovereign nation. This is something that was done in the best interest of Nigerians to ensure that we have a sustainable power market going forward.
Right. Now, the government says it wants to put a stop to estimated billing. If I may ask, is estimated billing a taboo, really, or are we talking about crazy billing here? Because these are two different things. Estimated billing is actually a method of billing where if you don't have a measure to determine the actual price of something, you can actually give an estimate. So if you say no to estimated billing and not everyone has been metered, wouldn't it lead to wastage, and who bears the costs?
So I'll separate that question into two segments. So I think you rightly said estimated versus crazy billing. What the capping regulation from the NERC outlines is that I cannot have a two-bedroom house in Kuje, and I have a meter. And there's 10 other houses in that same Kuje that have meters and they're the same structure. And the people that are metered, on average, they consume maybe 5,000 naira per month. And then the houses that are not metered, they get a bill for 20,000 naira. The capping was instituted to eliminate what we call estimated arbitrary billing, or what you refer to as crazy billing. It ensures that you cannot get a bill that is not based on facts and the consumption around your area. Now, this has been, quite frankly, something that we believe was at times being used by certain distribution companies to not have an objective measure to what it is that they build consumers. So the capping regulation essentially eliminated estimated arbitrary billing and put sanity into it. And what the president has mandated is that there should be a full enforcement of this capping regulation that the NERC had put out. Now, furthermore, in terms of metering, when we think about anyone having cause to complain about their electricity bill, it is because they don't understand what the relationship between what they consume and what they're billed. A meter eliminates any arbitrary estimation. It ensures that the consumer feels very comfortable about the transparency of what they're charging. So to fully get rid of this risk of consumers feeling cheated, the president has mandated that working with the central bank, that we embark on a mass metering scheme, which is broken into two pieces. One is the president approved a waiver to allow for zero duty on meters. This will help with We already actually have meters at the ports that have been stuck because of some misalignment between the price on landing and the customs duties that were applied to them. That will resolve, and you will see a flood of meters that are already in Nigeria coming in to be installed. Furthermore, we at the federal government are making $200 million plus available through a partnership between the Central Bank of Nigeria, and we're having discussions with the World Bank as well, where we will bulk procure meters in partnership with the discos, and then they will go out and install those meters, and the repayments to the federal government will be done over time via the discos. So, and we estimate we're going to bring in 4 to 5 million additional meters between the next 12 to 18 months. But this will be a ramp up. You'll start to see impacts of this, as I said, as we clear out things that are already, meters that are already at the port. So, we're at the federal government working very closely with NERC, the Federal Ministry of Power, Central Bank of Nigeria, the Federal Ministry of Finance, and the Customs Service, embarking on this very aggressive scheme because we believe that only with mass metering are you going to be in a position where customers and consumers that are being billed feel very comfortable around what they're paying.
Right. I will still take you up on that issue of metering and particularly the importation of metering. But then we understand that the proposed tariff increase targets mainly the rich. Is that a long-term viable policy? How can it be practically effected?
So I think what the analysis and the data has said is, if you look at more affluent communities and locations, they're mostly metered. Go to an Ikoyi or VI, Asokoro, Metama, and other GRAs and industrial areas around the country that there's been, unfortunately, a focus on metering those areas, partly because some of those areas people have acquired their own meters through the upfront payment. Those locations are metered, and they're getting a high quality of service. Some locations have, 20 hours, 18 hours, some even up to 23, 24 hours a day of electricity. It is not fair that somebody, let's say in my neck of the woods, in Jigawa, maybe in Nkwashi local government area or Kazori local government area, that is maybe receiving 4 or 5 hours per day, should be paying the same rate as someone in these other areas that is receiving a very high quality of service. So through the order that the Nigerian Electricity Regulatory Commission has put out, anyone receiving less than 12 hours per day, as well as the underprivileged that are on lifeline tariffs, what we used to refer to as R1, they will be protected. We then will look at a review of the tariffs based on service principles when the discos have consulted and engaged with those clusters that are getting a high quality of service. They will work out and communicate the tariff rates that those will work on with supervision from the regulator. So essentially, this structure is more equitable. In the past, we've just had tariff reviews that impacted everybody the same across the board, regardless if you were in an area that is receiving very poor service or an area that is receiving a high quality of service. This incentivizes distribution companies to improve their services, to be able to now achieve cost reflectivity for the whole nation. But
now, Mr.
one careful thing to think about is this is not intended to cause a distinction between the haves and the have-nots. The regulator has asked for performance improvement plans. We're not saying that places that are getting 4 hours, 5 hours will stay in perpetual darkness. There's regulatory documents submitted by the distribution companies that are called performance improvement plans that will ensure that they're improving service for everyone across the nation over time. But until they do that, and if they don't do that, they'll be sanctioned. But until they do that, we are not allowing for any reviews in the tariffs for those customers that do not feel that they're getting a high quality of service.
Now, how much of consultation did the government have with the discos before coming up with these measures? Now, these people have invested and, of course, deserve to also be protected. Don't forget, electricity has improved to a very reasonable extent. Now, does the government intend to honor the privatization agreements and protect the investments of its citizens?
Look, the tried and tested model in terms of driving quality for customers and improvements is having a market that is based on contracts and market principles, right, with the right regulatory oversight. The federal government has no desire to not meet its side of the commitments. And, we're also working to ensure that the distribution companies meet their sides of the commitments. Through the BPE, who has the mandate for the investment in the discos, and through numerous engagements, we've been meeting with discos at the management and ownership level, I'd say for maybe the past 3 to 4 months on a weekly basis. And everything that's being done is being done in partnership to ensure that government feels that Nigerians are protected and Nigerians are getting the right quality of service. And some of the practices, such as estimated billing and the lack of transparency that we've struggled with, we keep the discos accountable. And they've also made it clear that there are a number of measures that they think will support them. But as I said, government coming to the foreground with financing support. As you know, we for the bulk metering, government coming to the foreground with the Siemens PPI initiative that is also supposed to support discos with investment, and the advanced discussions that we have with the World Bank and Africa Development Bank on a low-interest distribution, rehabilitation, and expansion program that will be monitored through the Ministries of Power and Finance with the discos to ensure that they are getting the investment. These are all measures that the federal government is taking to ensure that this challenge of perennial underperformance from the power market is set to be concluded within the life of the Buhari administration.
Well, Mr. Ahmed, you just have to hold your thoughts there. We'll come back to you briefly after the break. Well, we'll take a break. When we come back, we'll still continue with this conversation and, of course, look at the manufacturing sector and its performance in the second quarter of the GDP numbers. Just stay with us. Welcome back. Thanks for staying tuned. We're still looking at the power sector and the recent developments there. And I still have in our Abuja studio the Special Advisor to the President on Infrastructure, Mr. Ahmed Zakari. Thank you very much, Mr. Zakari, for sticking on there. Right now, in fact, while we were on break, I was getting some tweets and complaints from consumers. I mean, why should the government be talking about increasing tariff at this time, considering the situation we all have found ourselves, the COVID-19 pandemic? Nigerians are still reeling in the effects of the COVID-19 pandemic. Shouldn't tariff increase be a gradual thing?
That's a great question. And that's why we've tried to ensure that there's an understanding. This is not a tariff increase. Federal government is not interested in a tariff increase on consumers. What we're trying to do is to ensure that there is more transparency and more equity in the power sector. People that are receiving a high quality of service and are metered, they should have an opportunity to consult and engage with the distribution companies that, as a consumer and a provider relationship, determine what is reasonable. Consumers that are not getting service should not be charged or should not be subject to reviews in their relationship with the distribution companies and the service providers until that happens. And ensuring that the system of estimated billing that Nigerians have complained about is eliminated. And then ensuring that, most importantly, individuals that are less privileged through the lifeline tariff have a maintenance. So this is essentially a change in the structure of the market to ensure that the relationship between service provision and what one pays is more aligned. But to insinuate that this is some tariff increase, I think is a bit, raising some concerns and trying to, encourage people not to understand the crux of the details of what we're trying to do. And this is why having these engagements and ensuring that the Nigerian Electricity Regulatory Commission and the Ministry of Power and others in government are communicating what consumer protections are that we're moving to, and then ensuring that we're allowing an environment where distribution companies are engaging directly with consumers to ensure that they get compensated for the service that they're providing, but only tied to improvements in service or where they're receiving high quality of service now. And as I've stated, this is nothing different than what consumers, through the mandated law that requires consultation, happen. As I stated before, there was a path that we were on that was going to raise tariffs for everyone in April. Government said that no, that's not something we think is justifiable. And NERC said this is not what we heard from Nigerians. And this is really just implementing exactly what came out of the reviews and the consultations, where Nigerians said, we're happy to pay for services, but we're not happy to pay for darkness. So we're trying to implement the desire and wishes that there's more equity in the system, but at the same time, put in the protections through mass metering, through an end to estimated arbitrary billing, and through protections of the poor, while we allow the market through the discos and the customers to have a relationship that is governed under the regulators' very strict oversight.
Well, Mr. Zachary, I wish we had more time to dwell on this conversation, but we really don't have that time. Thank you very much for coming on the show. Ahmad Zachary is the Special Advisor to the President on Infrastructure. Thank you very much for your time.